I'm Leo Walder for Kit Guru, and this is Leo Says, my opinion piece. And we've just had CES, so yes, I do have one or two opinions. It was a very strange CES. Used to be called Consumer Electronics Show, but now it's just CES, 3 letters, they mean precisely nothing. So last year we had Intel launching Coffee Lake, their 8th gen desktop platform. We would ordinarily have expected them to have launched that at CES. So we don't have any new Intel, well we do, but we have very little new Intel stuff for this CES. We had that new CPU with the AMD, my mistake, with the Radeon graphics core, very much not AMD. Radeon all over the place, AMD nowhere to be seen. Go to the control panel for the graphics and it's in blue. AMD, not that, no, my mistake, with the Radeon graphics core. So we saw that laptop a few places. We saw Intel showing them off, but we also saw them at Dell and such like, and Acer also had them. Looking to get to grips with that. That in a way is one of the frustrations of shows. When you see a laptop, you can see it's got the hardware you want to play with, but all you can really do is kind of move a mouse around. I mean, there's no games installed on it or any such, and you're under show lighting, so you don't even get a feel for what the screen particularly looks like. All you know is, I want to see that in a controlled environment and benchmark it and see how it works. It's there, let's have some. Intel understandably was busy with Meltdown and Spectre and such like, having got Coffee Lake out of the way. And as we know, the opening day of CES was actually the day that Microsoft was rolling out patches for these rather horrible security bugs. Which meant, of course, that all the tech people who are at CES didn't have the opportunity to try the bugs, benchmark before and after, although there is some suggestion that I/O in particular is being hit, and therefore SSD benchmarks are showing up significant drops in performance. And since we've been back from CES, there's been reports that Apple, with its iPhone 6 specifically, has been hammered on performance in, of all things, web browsing to the tune of 40 or 50%. I mean, massive hit. But that seems to be highly specific to a highly specific iPhone doing specific tasks, which is going to be how it feels that this is going to play out. Particular devices are going to suffer in particular ways. It's not everything takes a certain performance hit. We've yet, for example, to hear what happens with iPhone 7, iPhone 8. But 6, whoa, that do sound bad. It also suggests something, which is the way the processor is working when you're browsing the web. Why on earth is the processor working in that way, such that patching it to avoid this CPU flaw means that browsing takes a hit? You would not expect that. You'd have thought it'd be like when you're importing files or taking video from somewhere. Not this. This is really peculiar. No doubt we'll learn more in the coming weeks, but as things stand, it's very much more questions than answers. So CES opened with Meltdown and Spectre and Windows Update, and it was raining in Las Vegas. I'd come in via Washington, where it on the East Coast, where it was freezing cold, such that the plane had to be de-iced. Over on the West Coast in California, they had horrendous fires, really suffering badly. In Las Vegas itself, the rain to this Brit, frankly, seemed entirely normal. But apparently they hadn't rained for 220 something days, and to them it was a real shock. They had about 3 inches of rain in not very long, and the town flooded. Roads were shut. It was just absolute mayhem. The Uber drivers kind of went home, which would appear to be the modern metric for things going off the rails. So CES opened to confusion. The convention centre actually shut down for a few hours because the power went out to do with this rain getting in places it shouldn't have got in. And then we got back to normal. And we had Intel out of the picture. We had AMD talking up revisions to Ryzen. They're also talking about their Raven Ridge laptops. This is the new APU that has Vega graphics. Again, they're on show. Again, didn't get a chance to actually do anything substantial with them. You literally look at them and go, I want that HP NV360. Can I take it away, please, and have a play or whatever? The answer, of course, is no. But in time, we will get our mitts on these things and we'll see just what this APU means. And we'll also get to see things like how's battery life and is it a good laptop and all those other things that matter. But for now, we just know those APUs have arrived. Let's have some. Nvidia is another giant in the world of PC gaming, and essentially from our point of view they took CES off. They were there, they were highly present, but they were talking about machine learning of cars. Now you can understand this, the world of automotives and self-driving cars and such like is clearly a potentially enormous market for Nvidia, as is deep learning, driving all these Facebooks and Googles and such like. So it's entirely understandable that Nvidia is focusing on these markets. But nonetheless, from the point of view of PC gaming, as far as I'm aware, they had precisely nothing to say. They're sitting pretty with the 10 series. They don't need to move on at the moment. They're keeping their powder dry. They've got bigger fish to fry. That's fine. So what do we get? We got big screens, really big TVs to play your games on. Well, okie dokie. We saw one of those big screens at the Asus. They had quite a lot of stuff on the show. It's a big TV. Actually, it's a huge TV, in fairness. Also, Corsair had ones, Corsair as well. But it's a big screen. Well, okie dokie, fair enough. But I don't think it even fit in my house. Huge screen. So it's like, yeah, fair enough. And my interest, therefore, was not high. Now, at Computex, we had Max-Q, and there's a rumour that Nvidia is working on a GTX 1050 or 1050 Ti Max-Q, which is sounds like a peculiar thing. But the big screens, I looked at it, I thought, if you like, fair enough. And I moved on, I mean, mentally and physically, because it just did nothing for me. So essentially, the twin worlds of motherboards and graphics cards, to my mind, basically took CES off as a holiday. They were off on vacation. There were a few motherboards floating around for the Ryzen 2000s with the X470, but they look much the same as X370. And what can you say? Bring us some new processors, let's plug them in, let's see what happens. But we're not expecting the motherboards to do anything fundamentally different. So the fact that one or two have broken surface, yeah, fair enough. Laptops galore, as I say, with Intel processor and Radeon graphics, and also with AMD processor and AMD graphics, and that's all fine till we get our mitts on them. We don't really know a great deal. There were other odds and ends, such as an MSI Titan that had a 10 gigabit of Quantia Ethernet in it, which is obviously for workstation use is terrific, but it's not the sort of thing you can get truly excited about. So there's plenty of stuff, but until you actually test it, doesn't mean a great deal. And the trouble with laptops, of course, is you stand a metre or two away from them and it's just a laptop. So actually seeing them there, and it doesn't really get the juices going. Dell had the 13-inch with the OLED screen that we reviewed months ago. It still looks absolutely stunning, and frankly, in a darkened, they had a kind of a restaurant bar area where they had a whole bunch of things on show, along with their massive, great big curved screen. And frankly, that OLED screen, which is in the far corner, when you stood up close, it still looks absolutely mind-blowing, even in that dim, probably because of the dim lighting, in fairness. But it stood out from the other laptops around it, despite its age and despite the fact the actual laptop I'm not mad keen on, but that screen is just a piece of work. And I want to see that screen in many more devices. But the very fact it stood out says nothing else was OLED. So that's a bit of a shame. But such is life. But having said all that, there were things going on. Now, Razer has Project Linda, which essentially looks like a laptop, but kind of isn't. It's kind of an expansion kit for your Razer phone. Where the mouse touchpad area goes, you clip your phone into the cavity there, hit a button which locks in the USB Type-C connector to engage the phone with the laptop chassis, and then the phone powers the laptop. So the screen, all the computing and power and such like, is all powered off the graphics and the CPU and the memory and the storage in the phone. The laptop itself has no computing power. It's keyboard, well, not mouse, because you actually use the phone screen as a mouse pad, but it's keyboard and screen and I/O for the phone. Very clever idea. Immediate instinct when you see it is clever Razer. Once again, you stole the show, because when you walked into the convention centre, that's the first thing you saw was Razer with their clever stuff, including Project Linda, and yet we understand that it might actually be a product. Razer has a history of showing off things in development and winning awards and getting us going, but it seems that Project Linda might actually be a thing, in which case, hurrah. Next question obviously is when and how much. Time will tell. Other companies that had things on show, two case companies in particular actually, CoolerMaster. Now CoolerMaster had a rocky 2017, and that's the polite way of putting it. All sorts of things that didn't quite go as you might hope. And they were showing off a bunch of things, including RGB products. Now, obviously everyone has shown off RGB products. CoolerMaster has a bit of a history of showing R or G or B products. So you buy a thing that's got fixed red lighting, say, and you go, oh, how do I change it to blue? You don't. It's a colour. So they actually had RGB, and the RGB looked good. So that was nice. So in a way, that's them just catching up. They also had revisions of their H500 case. That's the one with the two 200mm fans in the front that Dominic reviewed, which wasn't great. It had a number of failings. And they've revised it. They've put mesh on the front. They've put the air intakes in front of the fans. And they've changed a few other bits and pieces, and it looks like it might be a perfectly decent case. You look at it and you think, well, why wasn't that the original version? I mean, what went wrong? But, that's being a bit mean. So moving on, the revised H500 looks like it might well be a good thing. They had other cases on the show, including a maker version of that H500, which looked like a really good thing. They were showing that in an unusual form. It had two 200 fans on the front and two 200s on the roof. We also saw a 200ml liquid cooler in a case, which is the first time I've seen that. It looked very much like a prototype, and I wonder if that's actually going to be a thing. But we'll see. But CoolerMaster, they had a bunch of different products. They actually filled a large suite with products, all of which were new. And the general vibe, I truly expected to visit CoolerMaster and find them bleak and glum. Not so. That actually felt like 2018 could be a good year for CoolerMaster, in which case, hurrah. Phanteks, another company that brings out new stuff, and they had new stuff in a variety of directions, which was quite interesting. So they had new power supplies, which they're made by Seasonic and they're badged as Seasonic, but they are fundamentally to handle systems where you either want to power two systems off one power supply in the same case, and Phanteks has two cases that can do that trick, or you can power one system from two power supplies. You can sort of connect them. That would be the best way. Link them together, and you can then either have extra double juice from your power supplies, or you can have failover. If one power supply gives way, the other one kicks in. That to me is of less interest, because realistically, if you're using Seasonic, you do not expect them to fail. I mean, nothing's perfect, but that's as good, close to perfect as you get. So the idea of powering two systems in one case off one power supply, that's clever. It's not something I'm particularly interested in the main, but I can see the sense of it. There are people who want to do the thing of play games while the other mini PC is streaming, for example, without having to have two separate boxes. So there are certainly people in the market for that, without a shadow of a doubt. And similarly, if you want to have a gaming box and a video editing box, that would also make sense. You can, after all, put that in one decent case. So not daft, but niche. They had a couple of RGB lighting controllers that look really good. They also had a new Eclipse case 350. We've already had the 400 and the 300, both of which are good products. The 300 was just superb, brilliant budget case. 350 basically is more of the same, it's just bigger and looks like a very clever thing. They also had a bunch of their liquid cooling hardware. They're continuing to use DDC pumps rather than D5. My preference is for D5 because they're sort of bigger and beefier and more reliable and more grunty. And Phanteks' reason for going for DDC is because they're smaller and more compact. They also have an interesting take on the cooling reservoir, which is that they're a kind of a block shape. Loads of flat faces, loads of mounting options. And the logic there, rather than using a cylinder, is, well, your case is a box. Why would you put a cylinder in a box? Which is true, of course, because you then have to come up with mounts for the reservoir pump setup. And there you go. Whereas if you've got a block and you've got mounting holes and the pumps in the reservoir. So logically, what Phanteks is doing makes perfect sense. It's different to the mainstream, but it makes sense. And I like what I saw. Phanteks, always good to see them, but they, once again, tick in the box, nicely done. And then we had two stories that came out just from conversations. One was something I just missed because I'm not really a chip guy. I mean, obviously everything I touch uses chips, but Intel has had a joint fabrication deal with Micron for years, I believe since 2005. That's coming to an end. When they work through the current NAND project, which is going from 64 layer to 96, that apparently is the end. So that's either going to be in 2018 or maybe 2019. Intel apparently spent about $5 billion converting a fab in China to make flash memory. Micron has extended its fab in Singapore, apparently spent $4 billion. We're talking big money for fabs. And so they're each basically working on their own fabs. And we are told, and this is the thing, that whilst the NAND thing is going to separate, their joint project on 3D XPoint will continue. And I don't know what it means. I don't know what that means. I don't know if that means that the XPoint Optane products, the sort of the caching hard drives product, is the end of the line, or does it mean that they're basically doubling down and really getting on with Optane DIMMs, or some other version of Optane? Because what's come out initially with Optane storage, frankly, looks shocking. The reliability looks absolutely dreadful. So whether they've either decided this great thing is actually a stinker and we're pulling the plug, or whether they have actually decided, no, we've got to fix this. This is really, really important. This is the future. We're chucking all our resources into this. Forget the other stuff. We'll get on with that separately. This is the only thing that matters. I truly don't know. I don't know if it means we're going to see Optane DIMMs, i.e. memory type stuff that's made of Optane stuff rather than DDR4, DDR5. Don't know what it means. Would love to find out, and I'm going to have to do some research and talk to some people. But the separation of the ways, it happened it doesn't happen for a year and a half or so, but essentially the groundwork has been laid, and I just missed it. So Intel Micron, parting of the ways. And then the final bit of gossip, this is actually the only piece of gossip that I came across, was that before CES, I was saying that Corsair's employed some people from the EKWB liquid cooling team, and the rumour I heard was that actually Corsair had intended to buy EKWB. The deal, for whatever reason, did not go through, so Corsair thought, well, we'll have the staff instead, so they hired a bunch of the important people. So presumably Corsair's plans are on track, just not quite in the same way, which obviously means that we know this. Corsair has plans for liquid cooling, actual custom loop, open loop liquid cooling. They already, are a huge force in the Ace Tech closed loop market, and if they're going to go that gung ho in the open loop market, I look forward to seeing what they do. But if they're as serious as looking at buying EKWB outright and wholesale, a bold move, sort of thing we expect from Corsair, frankly. They are bold people. They do not do things by halves. But this obviously is going to be let's see what they get up to in 2018. Because if Corsair comes along and does something special with liquid cooling, I can't wait to see what it is. So that was CES. I'm Leo Waldrop for Kit Guru. If you like this video, thumbs up. If you don't, thumbs down. If you want more from Kit Guru, click to subscribe. And I'll be back with Leo Says next week.